Hello, everyone. My name is Mo Hussein. Today, what we're going to be talking about is property and asset management at the intersectionality of technology, how AI is impacting operations, best practices, and how to leverage and get the most out of the tooling that you're using today.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 553. Most rental property owners assume their financial reports are telling them the full picture. They're not. My guest today is Mo Hussein, CEO and founder of Balanced Asset Solutions. Mo has spent 15 years in the property management industry, including roles inside AppFolio, Yardi, and Google Cloud, helping operators find out where their numbers went wrong and what it's costing them. Today, we're talking about why accounting systems break as portfolios grow and how bad data leads to bad decisions. Mo, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian. Happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your background. I'm especially interested in your experience with Yardi and AppFolio, which are both, like the top of the class when it comes to multifamily asset management and property management software. But tell us about yourself and your background in this area.
So my name is Mo Hussein. I've been in this industry for a little over 15 years at this point. I started off in the industry working at a little company at the time known as AppFolio and spent some time at Yardi Systems. Ironically, they're both in Santa Barbara, not too far away from each other. But seeing just the evolution of technology and adoption just within this space has been very, very fascinating in just the past 15 years. If you think circa, 20 or 2005, it wasn't too long ago where the notion of like making an online payment as a renter or an online application or signing an online lease was completely foreign for this particular industry. I always joke that, fax machines today exist because of the real estate insurance and healthcare. And so over the past 15 years, we've seen kind of an explosion in just technology that's in the prop tech space, everything from managing your financials, operations, asset management, which usually sits on top of property management and feeds data from property management in order for decisions to be made on how an asset is kind of performing. And now more than ever, with the acceleration and adoption of AI, the importance of accurate data and clean data is very important to be able to leverage a lot of this automation and tools that kind of exist. And so marrying together the understanding of how to work within these database kind of best practices is very important in order for, the decisions that feed from that information are made effectively. So
with that background that you have, I'm sure you've seen a lot of people accessing these tools correctly and then accessing these tools incorrectly and making bad decisions because they're not using them to their full capacity. I'm a big fan of AppFolio. We use that both for our multifamily property management software, and we even use it to keep track of the accounting for our short-term rentals and resorts that we have, including a boutique hotel. So, AppFolio is where I come from. I know Yardi is a big one too, but I guess let's kind of start there. Like, what do you see as the benefits of those types of property management softwares? But then where are people not leveraging them to their fullest or making mistakes in the way that they're actually using them?
And we have clients that reach out from time to time again, and usually it's when there's like a fire. When I say a fire, they're being audited. They have an investor that's digging into the reporting and financials and the accuracy of the information in their database. One thing that's very important to note is that in property and just asset management, you can't really disassociate operational management from financials. They do kind of coalesce, and one impacts the other, especially on the operation side. If you take something like a simple metric as like vacancy loss, which usually can be quantified, and how that particular KPI is derived. It's, in a multifamily kind of context, you have the period of time between the tenant moving out and then the future tenant kind of moving in. And there's a bunch of different things that happen kind of in between across operations and even on the accounting side. Property manager, leasing agent, somebody needs to do an inspection, maintenance crews need to be deployed, a unit turn needs to be captured, and the unit needs to be made ready for the new tenancy. Marketing and leasing needs to start advertising the unit. They need to go through the entire life cycle of a prospect initiating or expressing interest in the unit, going through the showing, application process, getting approved, converted. Accounting needs to move out the previous tenant. And so when you're looking at a simple metric as just like vacancy loss and all the different components that actually contribute to that, it's important that the database that's being used, AppFolio in your case, and how you're managing that entire process is being accurately defined, categorized, and used effectively. Ideally, your database becomes kind of your place of truth. In a lot of ways, where clients or folks are kind of falling short is, using like their bank accounts, for example, as their place of truth versus the accounting system, which should be your place of accounting truth, using disparate Excel spreadsheets or different point solutions rather than using the database that you're licensing in order to be able to capture that entire life cycle and being able to understand where bottlenecks, cogs, and things are existing in your operational workflow, which are ultimately contributing and impacting your kind of bottom line. And so using the database as it was intended, being kind of your place of truth, both on the accounting and the operation side is very, very key, and having controls and SOPs and processes and, a feedback loop to understand where things can be improved is very key.
Let's talk about source of truth here, just so people are tracking us correctly. So AppFolio has a very, very robust accounting software system. So it's built in. You don't need to use Quicken or QuickBooks or any other sort of accounting if you have AppFolio. I'd imagine that Yardi probably has their own as well. And I see you nodding yes. And then we were working with another management company that used RealPage software, and they had their own accounting system too. And this is like, really top-notch accounting software. And that is the source of truth. I wanted to just establish that. But so let's talk about the level beneath that. Like, you've got your top of the list is AppFolio, Yardi, maybe RealPage. And then you have all these other competitors out there that are competing for, like, those who have maybe 1 to 20 units, a smaller portfolio. Do those have good accounting systems too, or do most people find that they have to use QuickBooks alongside of them?
I always joke that usually a lot of folks become kind of accidental landlords, and that's usually where things kind of start. It may be a broker that's initially, mainly in activities around brokerage services, buying and selling on behalf of their clients. And then over time, maybe their clients want them to manage kind of their assets. And so personally, I think usually up until about 20 units, you can probably get away with using either Excel or even using something like QuickBooks. The challenge with something like QuickBooks is you'll spend time on building something like a rent roll, which you may need to get to your lender, or certain type of financial reporting. QuickBooks is a great general accounting system. When I mean a general accounting system, it's not particularly tailored for the real estate industry. There's no notion of a tenant. There's no notion of a unit. There's no notion of a property. And so when you're looking at financials for a particular asset, you want to look at things from a property perspective. And so you don't have that lens with like a QuickBooks. And so it's difficult maybe to scale, and you're going to be spending a bunch of time manually coalescing manual kind of Excel spreadsheets to deal with kind of that gap. And then additional functionality, like on the operational side, like being able to execute, an online lease or an online rental application, or being able to syndicate with the ILS, the internet listing sites like Truly, apartmentsforrent.com, and things of that sort. And so a lot of these providers like AppFolio and Yardi, there's different tiers also of products that exist. There's like an SMB, or like, folks in small to mid-sized portfolios, somewhere tune of 50 to a couple hundred units, and products that are great in that kind of that space. And then you have like your enterprise are meant for the large, managers, asset managers that are managing maybe thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of units that have a more robust, larger, more complex kind of database. And so I'm of the mindset that, it's better to kind of future-proof yourself. You're going to continue to be in real estate or continue to grow a portfolio. Some of these platforms have a minimum, but the amount of time savings you'll get from using these all-in-one solutions versus trying to cobble together QuickBooks and other point solutions to get an actual complete solution, there's an opportunity cost of time there, right? Nobody got into real estate because they love managing accounting systems or software.
Let's kind of level set. Tell us why it is so important to have proper books and accounting in your management software.
Especially if you're managing for third party, like for other owners, other portfolios, what's called trust accounting. These software products like AppFolio, Yardi that kind of exist allow for you to be able to manage other people's assets on their behalf and separate and segment out the accounting and the operations on a per property kind of basis. And so it has these systems have deep audit trails, and they allow for you to be able to provide reporting to, those owners, investors, what have you. And so you have kind of that trust factor in these products that exist in the market and kind of widely being used. You have, the deep audit trail. So, a lot of states in California, you have the Department of Real Estate that has regulatory compliance around trust accounting and how you manage the financials and the assets on behalf of other owners. If you don't do them right, you risk potentially even losing your broker license as well. And so, reputational damage, being able to kind of scale. Also, these products allow for a lot of automation in managing, large scale unit renovations or a lot of different tenants that are moving in, or the financials across the entire portfolio. Compliance around kind of trust accounting, and then also kind of that deep audit trail and be able to provide financial reporting to your owners and investors that trust the information coming from these systems.
Give us some examples of when you've seen the systems that you just described operating incorrectly or breaking down, and just the damage that it caused because the numbers either weren't there or weren't kept correctly.
We see folks that maybe are used to using a very generic or general accounting system like QuickBooks, which it is a very simple and easy system to kind of use. These systems like AppFolio and Yardi have heavier guardrails on how you book transactions, how you perform payable functions, how you do reporting, even how you do bank reconciliations, where it's like forcing you to tie out the bank balance to the individual property balances associated with that bank account. And so usually the folks that we see kind of struggling or usually run into issues are folks that are not regularly reconciling their bank accounts, they're commingling funds with like their corporate. When I say corporate, the management company or the brokerage business with the properties that they're managing on behalf of their owners or investors, and then not having the right guardrails and controls around permissions, who can do what. You'd be very surprised like how endemic like embezzlement exists in this particular industry because of lack of control, process, and proper accounting guardrails around how trust accounting is kind of handled.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com.
If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. So Mo, here's what I've noticed about AppFolio, and I suspect it's the same for Yardi, RealPage. These are kind of legacy property management softwares with legacy accounting software built in. They've been around. I mean, I'm sure AppFolio, I've been using it probably at least 12 years now. It's probably been around for 20 years, maybe longer. And same for Yardi and RealPage. But the problem is now with AI, they're kind of, in a way, like they're still very functional. They're still doing a lot of like the important stuff, but it's very hard to go back in and layer AI into a legacy system. At least that from my perspective. And they're you have to pay an upcharge to get like the Lisa bot and to do what you really want to do. I suspect that within a year, someone's going to come along and put together basically exactly what they're doing, only it's going to be AI based and it's going to be way better. And I'll just say, I also want to just kind of throw in, I've been using Claude to go into AppFolio and do audits for me. And it's looking at all the data that's there that I've always had access to, but never really, recognize, hey, I should look at this and see how these two things go together. And I am getting like X-ray superb insight from Claude when it goes into AppFolio and it pulls these like 30-page audits for me. I can see exactly what's working right and what's not working right. And that just kind of builds up to, okay, there's change on the horizon. These legacy systems, are they even going to be necessary? Because we can just have Claude go and do exactly what they're doing or build our own whatever to do it. Your thoughts on that?
We're seeing that in the industry. There are folks that are starting to kind of experiment with AI, trying to extrapolate kind of insight. I think one term that we're starting to kind of coin is kind of like, the difference between like a system of record versus like a system of action. And usually a system of action sits on top of your system of record. There's always going to be a place and a need for a system of record. And what I mean by that is that these databases where you're doing work and using it as your place of information, like a tenant ledger, a general ledger, being able to, make a payment to a vendor, processing online rental applications, producing basic kind of financial reports. The real unlock is, and usually a lot of asset managers specifically, they're usually working with a lot of different property managers. So they get different reporting. Everybody's using their own chart of accounts. They need to figure out a way to kind of standardize that information and understand operations within each of those property managers that they're working with, and being able to compare one asset to another, cross-pollinate best practices and things of that sort. And we see that as kind of like a system that sits on top of their system of record. These databases aren't going anywhere, but I think the direction that the industry is kind of headed is having and layering on a product or some type of a smart agent and system of action that sits on top, that's able to standardize, coalesce information across all these different products, provide insight into where operational bottlenecks are existing. Like you mentioned, using AI to understand kind of compliance and being able to have kind of visibility and kind of best practices and when things are being done well versus what things are not. But, there's a lot of noise around, even we're seeing in the broader kind of a tech market of like, hey, is Salesforce going to be, replaced by somebody that's vibe coding a basic system that can do a lot of the functionality. And maybe for very, very, very small companies, like using a pure kind of AI chat-esque, kind of vibe coded product is something that would work. But, as portfolios kind of grow, complexity kind of grows, these systems of record will always kind of have a place and will be essentially an input to that system of action that sits on top, that's able to provide that visibility and automation.
Talk about what you're doing with AI, because you're kind of in this space. You're leveraging AI to kind of take it to that level you just discussed. But tell us a little bit about what you're up to.
Well, there's a lot of noise in the market, generally speaking, around kind of AI and what it means. And so I think, the AI that's going to win, or like the applications of using AI where it's going to be most impactful, is verticalized AI, like AI that's specifically built for a particular industry versus like a generic type of interface like a ChatGPT or even kind of a Claude. And the reason that verticalization is important is because agents and automation and that AI essentially is using a set of data that it was used to learn on the skill sets that it's able to execute on based on those data sets that are specific for that particular vertical. And so in our case, the system that we're building, PropStrata, is specifically tailored towards real estate operations across property, asset, and kind of fund management. And we're specifically building a system that understands those systems of record, which is all these different databases we kind of talked about, and giving flexibility to the user and being able to build their own reporting, automating across those different products. And a lot of times, a lot of property and asset managers are usually using at least 3 different tools to operate the business. And these tools, although may have some level of integration, the data between the two is not completely 100% interconnected, if you will. And so having kind of that separate layer that's able to actually dig into all the different components between all those different products and being able to understand where operational bottlenecks or where things can be improved or where things are impacting bottom line is going to be the real unlock. And so the other thing to kind of be mindful of is, going back to kind of the build versus buy kind of opportunity cost, right? And so although a lot of the AI and tooling and stuff that's available today, if you have the time, the capacity to build something, is absolutely great. Going back to the point I made earlier, people don't get into real estate because they want to build a tech company. And so ideally, there's going to be a provider that kind of comes into the space and then it's able to kind of provide that flexibility on top of their systems of record.
What I'm taking away from what you're saying is, most operators have multiple software or systems that they're getting into. They have to log in, pull information from one place, combine it in another place to provide a full report. And what you're building is an AI that sits on top of all that and can kind of be your overseer, see what's going on in all of those different systems and report back to you.
Automate workflows between those different systems. Maybe using one system for leasing, another system for your property management, maybe another system for your corporate accounting for your books. And so they may be billing back to the properties, things of that sort. So
tell our listeners how they can find out more about you and the company that you just mentioned, and feel free to, plug whatever you'd like to.
You can find us online at www.propstrata.com. It's a mixture of property and strategy. That's actually how we came up with that kind of word. And today we're able to integrate across all the different prop tech products you're using. Yardi, AppFolio, Property Meld for maintenance, QuickBooks, whatever you're using. As long as there's kind of API extensibility, we're able to figure out a way to kind of access it and kind of combine that information. The other challenge that we see with a lot of folks using these different products is building your own custom reports. Like, hey, there's a particular metric that I want to understand, like something like, adjusted like occupancy rate, which would take into consideration people that have already put notice that they're going to be moving out but haven't moved out yet. So using like a very basic metric like just occupancy, which is just occupied units over total units, doesn't give a good story of what like your forecasted or adjusted occupancy looks like, which also takes into consideration folks that have already put in a notice to move out but haven't moved out yet. And so creating some of these custom metrics and creating your own KPIs is also why a lot of folks will push data to kind of Excel. But then the challenge with Excel is now you're kind of managing your own worksheet that doesn't have the guardrails and controls within a database, in terms of you can accidentally put a period, a zero in the wrong place. And usually by the time you've already made an assessment or made a decision based on that assessment, maybe the problem gets recognized at that point. And so the platform we're building is enabling kind of that flexibility and building your own KPIs and also being able to produce your own custom reporting.
Is it allowing you to like vibe prompt what it is you like, the whatever the KPI that you want to see, without having to go to the reports and find the particular section.
Yeah, we haven't deployed the prompt yet. We will probably in the very, very near future. But a lot of these metrics, like just over the 15 years I've worked in kind of this industry, there's a lot of different metrics and KPIs that I know are really relevant to all operators, and we have a deep understanding of kind of the limitations that exist in the platforms that they're kind of using. And so the real unlock, what we're doing now and providing a lot of focus and value, is around kind of automations between these different systems. Like, hey, because of this trigger, one example is, as a property manager, if folks aren't paying rent, you eventually escalate things to the point where you serve them, and then you need to start the entire eviction process. You need to interact with your legal counsel or lawyer. But in order for them to start their process, you have to provide them with the tenant ledger, the lease, the notice, all this information. And so if you are a property manager that's managing over 1,000 units, you're spending on a monthly basis somewhere between 40 to 80 hours on just managing delinquencies and kicking off that eviction process. And so we've been able to automate that complete process and provide a dossier that already compiles all that information that you can easily hand over to your legal counsel to kind of go ahead and start that kind of eviction process. And so a lot of these kind of automations and things that folks are doing already on kind of a monthly basis is where we see a lot of value, aside from just being able to interface with a chatbot that provides information.
What do you think the property management software and accounting for property management will look like a year from now and then 5 years from now?
And I want to establish kind of corollaries that we've seen in like big tech. So, over 20 years ago in big tech, a lot of applications were on premise. What I mean by on premise is that there's some server sitting in some office, and it wasn't as widespread use to use SaaS or web-based applications. And so we saw a huge migration, .com boom, and everything going kind of to the cloud, where you can just access whatever database or application via the web. Fast forward a decade or two later, you have analytical products that are starting being built, and then now you have machine learning, data science, and also like AI. And so property management and prop tech industry is going through a similar evolution. It was actually very interesting during, like, COVID was actually a massive accelerant of property asset management, they're starting to use web-based applications and doing everything kind of in the cloud. And now that's even accelerating further for folks now that want to be able to utilize these AI products and AI tooling. And so I see over the next 3 to 5 years that, using Excel, manual workflows, doing things that are there's a lot of things in property and asset management that are very repetitive, how reports are done, how management fees are calculated, how, leasing is done. And so a lot of these things can be put into a deterministic automated kind of workflow, if you will, that's based on a particular trigger. And that's where I see kind of the industry going over the next 3 to 5 years, is that a lot of this tedious and repetitive work will be kind of automated with pieces of technology that sit on top of your systems of record, and these smart systems that kind of automate that with the only work being kind of left is the analysis by humans and being able to understand kind of the business and tweak processes and things of that sort. There may be a time in the not so distant future where you can have, a single or a couple of operators managing thousands of units, because a lot of these workflows and stuff have been automated.
Mo, thank you so much for coming on the show today. This was really interesting, talking about AppFolio, which, I live inside of it sometimes, and just kind of the changes that are on the horizon there. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much, Brian.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.